Welcome to The Creative Influencer, where we discuss all things creative with an emphasis on influencers. The Creative Influencer is hosted by John Pfeiffer. John is an entertainment attorney in Santa Monica, California, who represents influencers and other creatives.
This is episode 7 of the third season of the Creative Influencer podcast. Today we interview Rena Owen. Rena is a self-described, air quotes, creative. She is a published author and an actor currently playing a role in the hit television series Siren. As an actor, Rena has won many awards, the list of which fills 2 pages on IMDb. Check it out. She is also one of only 6 actors, so only 6 in the world, who have worked with both George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, and the only female on that short list. Rena shares her use of social media as an actor, both how she uses it to connect with her audience now and how that's changed over the years. She also discusses the unique path that brought her to acting and what keeps her motivated as a veteran in the industry. Enjoy. I am joined today by Rena Owen. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
You are an actor.
Yeah, I call myself a creative because I'm a writer as well, a published writer, and I've been writing and acting for pretty much 35 years. So, you know, it's that question we get asked, what do we do? And I just put creative, right, because I like to be creative.
So I want to ask you about your use of social media as an actor, how you connect with your audience, and how that's changed over the years. But I want to lead with, you're currently on a series called Siren.
Correct. Correct.
What's the general premise of Siren?
Siren literally is based on the premise. It's set in a small coastal community called Bristol Cove, which is famous for its myths and legends about mermaids. And so the whole premise of the show is set on what happens when a real life mermaid comes to town. And, you know, we've been really blessed. We completed our 3rd season in mid-December, and we've got 2 episodes left screening. Tomorrow night is episode 9, and 10 is next week, which is our season finale. And we've got a really faithful, fervent fan base. So it's been a wonderful experience for me, and one of the biggest advantages of being shut down, locked down with COVID-19, is it meant I got the luxury of staying at home and watching the series and doing social media. I've had the luxury of time to do it and participate fully in it, and like all technology and all experiences with fans, I learned stuff from my fan base.
Well, I was watching, or when I went on your Instagram account, and I saw that you have clips from the show posted. There's also a behind the scenes where it looks like you're asleep on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is kind of fun. So you play Helen Hawkins. Tell us about Helen.
Helen is a town eccentric. She's a bit of a strange, mysterious woman is how Helen was described. And she runs a tourist shop that is full of mermaid and merman memorabilia and historical books and novels. And she has a passion for the mer culture. And we learned throughout the course of season 1 that this stems out of the fact that she is a hybrid. She is 1/8 mermaid, to be exact, as she says it. And the whole town's heritage is based on Charles Pownall. And Charles Pownall was the forebearer, so to speak, the forefather of Bristol Cove, and a fisherman who, apparently the story went, you know, he had a family, but he fell in love with a mermaid that he captured. And they had this child, this hybrid child, that was taken to the hideout which is the Native American culture, to raise this child, because in Western culture, the child would have been deemed as an abomination. And Charles Pownall's family, where Ted Pownall is the father of Ben Pownall, who's our lead, they kind of grew up learning that, yes, their great-great-grandfather had an affair, but this affair was with a prostitute, not a mermaid.
It's
So
funny
now,
they would say that's worse than a mermaid.
Exactly. And so Ted has come to learn this season that these mermaids are real and they do exist. And there's always been this kind of ongoing theme of, is Ben repeating his ancestors' history here by falling in love with our main mermaid, who's called Rin, and extraordinarily and beautifully played by Eileen Pownall. And from day one, when we did the pilot, I just knew, I thought, if this young actress doesn't work, if people do not buy into or believe that she is a mermaid, our show just wouldn't work. And she's done an extraordinary job, and her underwater skills are just off the charts, because she had to train. And she did all this deep diving and learned to do breath hold and built up her underwater skills. And she can hold her breath 4 to 5 minutes now. And so can Alex, who plays Ben. And the thing that's given our show an edge, because unlike the mermaids that we may have grown up on, our mermaids are beautiful and enticing and exotic, but they're top-level predators, and they will bite the head off a shark. So with them came this danger and this edge about, God, we've never seen mermaids being portrayed like this. And it's quite extraordinary. Our writers have often been very ahead of the times in terms of their storylines, whether that's environmental issues or species in the animal or the ocean kingdoms that are becoming extinct, like merpeople are, like mermaids are. But even with these current episodes, there's been already established and revealed in the trailer and a prior episode is their siren song has been weaponized. And we saw in the trailer that this is going to be used for mass destruction, and it will take people out. And you see that in the trailer. And even the season finale of season 2, episode 16, we were in a lockdown in a police state. It's kind of extraordinary how life always does, or art always does, end up imitating life, art. You know, it's kind of an all-in-one thing, really.
Which, to kind of transitioning, how has the lockdown been for you?
Well, for me, nothing's changed. And I think maybe a lot of people don't realize that about actors or actresses or creatives, is the bulk of our work is done at home. And I think even when you're possibly a teacher, you know, even at university, your homework, you read scripts, you learn your lines, you work on your dialogue, your accents, whatever. You do all of that at home. Home is your office. Then you go to set or you go to school and you execute what you've prepared. So nothing has changed for me in that regard. The other thing that hasn't changed is we never know where our next gig's going to be. Never. You know, unless you're on a show like Siren and we've been renewed and we start in July, and then I can say, well, at least I know I'm going to be in Vancouver from mid-July to mid-December. After that, nobody has a clue. So I'm real good at living day by day, and it's a skill you have to learn in our game, because you can't control the future. I've been attached to movies, and I learned this lesson the hard way. After I got launched with Once Were Warriors in the mid-90s, I attached myself to a film that I loved. It was a fantastic script. In the meantime, I was turning down paid quality work. And I learned then, because the film fell over, it lost its financing, or it didn't get its financing. And I learned then you take the job that's greenlit, that's in front of you, because our industry is fickle in that way. Some pilots do not get picked up and go to series 1, let alone series 2 or season 3. So this is nothing new for me, living like this. I have 4 jobs booked. I have no idea how that's all going to fall into place now. that the whole schedule got blown out of the water. I have no idea. But, you know, I live by the serenity prayer, which is, you know, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And you've got to learn to live like that as a creative, because we never know what's the day may bring or what's around the corner. So I think we get pretty good at living in the moment, which is really all we have. Right. I mean, you know, things happen. We could have an earthquake in LA tonight, you know, or tomorrow. So you just have to relish the moment. And I also learned that as being an actor. And I remember Dan Fossey, he was ran the Actors Institute in London in the 80s. And he said, you know, all you have is the present moment, is this moment. You and me right now, this present moment is all we have. And he said, when you realize that the present moment is the point of power, that's how you act. It's even when I'm acting, it's moment by moment, breath by breath, because my mind can't be elsewhere. My body can't be elsewhere. I have to 110% be present in that moment in front of camera or on stage. And it's a skill you apply to life.
You talked about breathing and being present in the moment.
Yeah.
It occurred to me, do you meditate?
I need to get better at it.
I think everybody needs to get better at it.
You know, and I did study it over the years, and kind of my forms of meditation really evolved into like I've practiced yoga for 25 years.
That was going to be my follow-up question, if you do yoga.
Oh, yeah. Love yoga. Nature walks has been a big meditation for me, and that's something I'm not doing right now, is nature walks or walking on the beach. But, hey, I can do that now. Beaches have opened up. But, yeah, the breath, there's a reason there's so many philosophies and disciplines that are all about the breath, because in simple terms, the first thing we do is we breathe. And the last thing we do is we exhale. And there's a great saying, and it's true, and I think it came up in Gladiator, we are but a breath. And that's all you and I are, is a breath. And, you know, often people can get caught up into thinking we're our bodies, but we can take away a body and still be alive. You know, look at a paraplegic.
Right.
You can take away a mind, a brain, and still be alive. But the thing, if you took away the breath, we no longer exist. That's how fundamental and important the breath is. And we call it in Māori culture the breath of life. Because if we didn't breathe, and it's interesting how this COVID-19 is attacking us at the essence of what it is to be alive. If you can't breathe, you no longer exist. I think it's also the thing that connects us all as living human beings around the world, and species, animal kingdoms, plants, that all their existence depends upon the ability to breathe. Incredibly important.
So I am going to shift gears, because you talked about nature walks, and I'm going to take you back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Where are you from originally?
I grew up in rural New Zealand. I grew up in a region called the Bay of Islands, which was a history I could apply to Bristol Cove, small coastal communities. We grew up inland of the Bay of Islands. And that particular town, well, we first and foremost was my grandmother's farm is where my family started. My grandmother had a very successful dairy farm. And then as the meatworks became more and more successful and expanded, we moved into the township that grew up around the meatworks. And in my school holidays, I would work at the tourist resorts, at the fish and chip shop, at the takeaway bar, or, you know, a waitress at a restaurant. And that's where I'd earn my pocket money. So I was very lucky that I grew up in nature for the first 18 years, because there's one thing you learn when you're farming. You're totally dependent upon nature, upon your 101s. And I kind of learned at a young age that was really the fundamental basics of life is, you know, the sun comes up, you plant, you harvest, you feed the family. And that those things are permanent in our lifetime. And then I moved to the city when I was 18, and things in the city life can change and does change. But I'm very grateful for my rural background, because it just served me well. You know, I've always had a very clear sense of who I am, where I come from. I grew up in a time with my dad was native New Zealander, Maori, and Welsh. That's where the name Owen comes from. Our great-great-grandfather was Arthur Owen, who came down with the whalers. Whaling was very popular around the South Pacific in that generation, and he met an Indigenous New Zealand woman. They had children, and that's where my grandfather and then my father came from. And my mother's a mixture of English, Scandinavian, a bit of French, a little bit of Welsh. So I'm a real mix. I'm a real true blue Kiwi, so to speak. And there's something about growing up in New Zealand. It's pretty much an island, small population. There's a lot to like about that background, and there's a lot to like about the country now. And many people move to New Zealand for the lifestyle. It's very clean down there. You got a small population. You know, they've handled our Prime Minister Jacinta Ardern has kind of crushed the COVID virus, which you would expect of a small country that can contain its borders. And also, you've only got a population of 4.5 million. America's got a population of nearly 350 million people. It's not so easy to do on a bigger scale, but that background served me for life, and it's obviously where I'll eventually go to retire. All my brothers and sisters still live there. My parents have both passed away now. I've got a lot of nieces and nephews. I mean, I was one of 9, very big family.
Well, we do share. I grew up on a farm in Nebraska, so I can echo everything you've said about growing up in a small place and the roots it gives you.
Oh, I know. It's a tricky one to articulate it, but you just know. You know what it's given you, and it serves you for life.
When you were talking about how permanent it is, I remember whenever it would rain, people would be in a good mood because we could turn off the irrigation wells and save money.
Yeah, totally dependent upon nature.
Right. So then you became a nurse.
Yeah, listen.
Nursing.
I know. It's one of those things. 3 things came into play. I was born creative. I was hypersensitive. I had a vivid imagination. I was overly emotional. I was a little drama queen when I was a kid. And I joined the local Maori club, which was kind of, traditional Maori singing and dancing, and would entertain the tourists and school dignitaries. And I stayed in the Maori club in high school. And I was first published when I was 8. I entered a poetry contest for children and I won. And I won a whole $5, which was a lot in the 60s.
Well,
and as a result,
for an 8-year-old.
Yeah, as a result of being in a Maori culture group in high school, it was our principal who said to the head of our English department, he said, I think you should audition that young Owen girl. I think she's got something. So my principal, it's really important the difference a principal or school teacher can make in a young person's life. He's responsible for my first stage role as Bloody Mary in South Pacific. And then I did such a good job. I got promoted to the lead of Calamity Jane and Calamity Jane. So I knew as a teenager that I found my place in the world. I knew that I found the thing that I love to do, and it gave me so much joy. Alas, at the end of the 70s, being an actor or a writer was not considered a serious career. As a woman, I could be a secretary, a teacher, or a nurse. And thirdly, as a little brown girl, I didn't really have role models on our TV screens. So it just wasn't an option to me. And I applied, I got accepted for teaching and nursing and ended up going nursing. And the great thing about that career is I was hospital trained. I was one of the last classes to be hospital trained before it shifted to university. And learning all about nursing was learning all about the human condition, which is what the arts are about, the human condition. So 3.5 years later, I was a qualified obstetric and general nurse. And then I went to London, 21 going on to 22. I wanted to do what every Kiwi does, OE, your first overseas experience. And I had aspirations of going to med school to become a doctor. But I got to London and I had my first taste of youth, and I did what young people did, and I got up to all sorts of mischief and traveled Europe, and I played with fire. I played with drugs. I was being young at music festivals and concerts. And it's the one thing I tell young people is nobody can play with them. You play with fire. I got burned. I thought I was educated. I was a qualified nurse. I had all my college qualifications, and I thought I could play with drugs. No, nobody can play because it's nothing to do with intelligence. But the good thing of going through that kind of AWOL season, because, when you look back on that, it was my first taste of freedom. I was away from family. I was away from the constraints and the constructs of what was expected of me and my career and studying and exams. And the good thing about that was it led me back to what I really wanted to do. And I still really wanted to tell stories. I still wanted to act, and I still wanted to write. And I remember, so I enrolled in drama school in late 1985. And I remember my dad saying, "Oh, it's a shame about your medical career." But it's interesting, once I sent him newspaper clips, because we're still newspapers in those days, and snail mail. And I posted home some reviews from my first stage play, and I got really good reviews because it was also a play I wrote. And then when he saw these newspaper clippings, he thought, "Oh, my daughter's in the newspapers. Wow, this acting thing wasn't so bad anymore." And so I've been doing it ever since. I've been doing it now for 35 years, theatre, television, and film.
And I did not say it at the top, and I was going to say it in the introduction before the actual interview plays, is that you have won many awards. It's 2 pages on IMDb.
Mm.
And that
Thank
you're
you.
one of only 6 actors in the world to have worked with both George Lucas and Steven Spielberg.
I know, not bad for a little girl who grew up milking cows, eh?
Not bad at all.
Not bad at all. And it actually, I had no idea of that statistic until I was actually at a comic book convention. I think it was Comic-Con in San Diego. And a Star Wars fan who wanted my autograph kind of told me that. He said, "You're the only blah, blah." And at that time, it was only 5 of us. I said, "No, I had no idea." But now there's 6 of us, but I'm still the only female. And it's pretty, I'm the only female. But yeah, that list recently went from 5 to 6, and I should know them all.
Who was the most recent addition?
Gosh, good question.
It's okay. I mean, I don't remember stuff like that. So
Yeah, I know. There's Liam Neeson, Samuel L. Jackson. Oh gosh, yeah, I'm going to have to look it up. I should memorize. I should memorize my fellow actors.
Company. It's not bad company. So you said that you were acting in a play you wrote.
Yes.
Let's talk about your creative process. What inspires you?
I think what inspires me is humanity. I'm always looking for that which helps us to be a better species, helps us to be better human beings. I'm always blown away by people who've managed to tap into and invest and make a difference in humanity and in mankind, because I think it's a work in progress for us to still learn how to be human, how to have healthy relationships. If I look at my career, I know I have a lot of friends from my generation and older generations who did jobs that society expected of them, that their parents expected them to do, but they kind of still have that song in their heart that they never had the courage to sing. I think we now live in a world where it's geared more to, hey, let your children be what they're born to be. So we have evolved a lot. Technology's been a big player in communication, and as you know, social media, I'm now doing social media, and it took me a long time to come around to social media. And I think coming out of that kind of era where we didn't have social media, it kind of scared me. I was afraid of being attacked or something, because I saw that happening to people who put themselves out there, and they'd get attacked and judged, and it kind of frightened me. And then what helped to sway me was the fact that I thought, you know what, this is the world we now live in. This is the way of our youth. Social media is a technology the world has embraced. And I thought back to the 60s, when I remember, I never forgot, my dad bought my grandmother her first television. And he set it up, and it was beautiful, and wood panels, those old-fashioned, beautiful black and white TV. And he set it up for her, and he turned it on, and she jumped. And she was just in awe. She's, my God. And I thought, if my grandmother could embrace the technology at the time, which was her first television, then who am I to kind of turn my nose up at our current technology? And once I got past that fear, really, everyone has been so kind. And I think I only got one or two people who were negative. But if you ignore them and you still like their comment and you don't engage with them, they don't come back. They don't come back, and you just, so I don't look for that aspect in social media. And it gives me much joy that I see these fans. And as I said earlier, we have a faithful, fervent fan base for Siren. And you like their comments or their posts, and they're posting about the fact that you like their comment. It just, and it's genuine. Right. And it makes their day. And it reminds me of the power that the arts have. And that I do try to pass this on to younger actors, because it's too easy now in this day and age of social media, is that young wannabe actors can look at this industry and see the magazine covers or the social media aspects. And I always say to them, I say, look, you got to come into it. As Michael Caine said, he said, set out to be a good actor. And if you're coming into this industry for fortune and fame, he said, forget it. He said, set out to be a good actor. And if being a good actor brings you fortune and fame, you've been doubly blessed. So I say to young people, you have to start from the premise that this is a servantile job. We're servants. And I learned that very early in theatre, is we're there to serve our audience. We're there to tell a story, to hopefully touch or expand people's minds. But when you think of our job as it's a servantile job, we're servants. When you look at the analogy of what's happened in lockdown, COVID, because I tell this to young people who consider maybe think about the arts. And I go, you know what, you can only survive this creative industry if it's what you're meant to do, if it's a need. Because if it's just a desire, you won't last. You just won't last. It's too tough. It's too unpredictable. And I say to them, food, people have to eat. Medicine, people get sick. And if you look at COVID, the people that became our essential heroes, essential workers and our superheroes were people in the medical industries and people in the food industries. But what did people do? What did they turn to in lockdown? They turned to the arts. They listened to their music. They watched films. They watched TV series. They pulled out those books they'd wanted to read for years and never had time. So the arts, I've always deemed the arts an essential part of our society that enriches our society. I've always considered writers to be recorders of history. And I've always been happy to support the battle when often governments do not deem the arts as essential. What would we have done in this season of lockdown if we did not have the arts or the internet, which came out of a creative thought, a creative vision? God, I'd hate to even think about that.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So
Because
it's a servantile job, though. You know, when you approach it knowing that you've been of service, and I see that in social media too. You know, if I can make their day, you know, it doesn't take. I delegate. Sometimes I'm on it too long, and I'm better at going. Okay, you've got an hour. Go and like these comments. Read their comments, and there's just I'm always just so touched by what I feel and sense is a sincere and genuine love of our show and an appreciation of who we are. And what a privilege, you know, and it is a privileged position to be in that position where people look up to you or they look at you and they want to follow your work, and you can be an influencer. And I'm pleased that I embrace social media because someone like in my age group, we won't get cast based on how big our social media following is because, you know, we're old. Let's face it, that's what we're called, and that's what we are. We're old. We're in the older generation. But for a lot of youth out there, that's a real casting consideration is, are they present on social media? Do they have a following? It's a tool for your job. But first and foremost, go back to what Michael Caine said, set out to be a good actor.
right, before you promote yourself.
Exactly. But then embrace the tools. You know, and it's what Hollywood's done so well, because I struggled with it. You know, it was a genuine struggle because, you know, I'm a shy introvert and like a lot of writers, you know, I'm not a 24-hour actor. And when the spotlight got cast on me and my fellow actors in Once Were Warriors, I was overwhelmed. There was nothing in my history on a dairy farm or in my career in the theatre that prepared me for such scrutiny and for such an intensity of attention. I kind of self-destructed in a way. And at the end of that year, I said to my mum, you know, if I can't find a way of being and living in the public eye, then I got to get out of this industry. And I saw here in Hollywood how a lot of our young youth were trained and had all of those skills to hit their mark once that light was on them. But some of them didn't take the same time and passion to hone their craft. So if you get someone who's honed their craft and actually has acting skills and can do red carpet, then you become a very viable and an employable actor.
Right. So I want to, again, shift gears.
Yeah.
It's time for reflection.
Yes.
What's a question you wish people would stop asking you?
Oh, gosh. It came from a line out of Once Were Warriors. It's a very famous film in that New Zealand independent film that launched myself and Temiera Morrison, who plays Jango Fett in Star Wars, and Cliff Curtis, who also went on to have a huge Hollywood career. There's a very famous line that says, "Cook me some eggs." And I often, when I'm back in New Zealand, I often get that yelled at me, "Hey, Beth, cook me some eggs." You know, it's a compliment, really. So there's not really a question that I don't like being asked. Well, it's not coming to mind straight away, but yeah, I got that a lot. It was kind of good when I finally did another character. And back in New Zealand, I did a 2-month stint on Shortland Street, and finally I'd walk down the street and they weren't yelling out, "Cook me some eggs," or "Hey, Auntie Beth." They were yelling out the name of my character. So that was a nice change. It's part of the privilege. You know, I look at John Travolta. He will always, in my eyes, Saturday Night Fever. You know.
Several years ago, I was at the Super Bowl, and everybody had been out in the parking lot drinking before the game, and every celebrity that walked by, they would yell their famous tagline at them.
Yeah. It's part of the blessing and the curse.
Right.
But it's you'll always be remembered for the film or the TV show that launched you. That's what got you into the minds of people, the minds and hearts of your audience. So you can't really bitch about it.
So another reflection question: knowing what you know now, if you could go back and talk to your younger self, what would you tell you?
Oh, gosh. That question always sounds easy, but it's not.
I know it's a hard question.
It's a really hard one because there's a lot of life lessons I've learned, and I've learned those by making a whole lot of mistakes. So if I had that opportunity, I would just say, just be you. Just be yourself. That your success lies in being yourself.
So what's ahead for you?
Can I just quickly say, though, you can't live that, though, because it's life, the journey of life. Like my aunties would say to me, if I only know now what I knew at your age, but life doesn't work that way.
No.
But it's really important for people to just that great saying, to thine own self be true. There's only one of you. There'll never be another one like you. You're totally unique and original. So once you know that, appreciate and celebrate who you are and who you're born to be. Don't try and be something you're not. What's ahead for me is I had 3 jobs booked. I'm glad I got my ADR done and completed for Siren when I first got back to town. I can't speak on these 2 jobs, unfortunately, because the exciting part was they were NDA jobs, non-disclosure agreement jobs, which mean, that's something kind of juicy. Will those jobs still happen? I don't know. Will Siren be renewed? I don't know. We'll hopefully find out next week before the end of May if it's going to be renewed for a season 4. If it is renewed, then that means I go back to Vancouver to shoot season 4. We're contracted for 6 seasons. I can talk about a New Zealand film I'm attached to called Fina, which is Whina, and her surname is Cooper. And Fina Cooper was a real legendary trailblazer in New Zealand. She passed away in the 80s, and it's absolutely a role of a lifetime and a privilege providing it happens and I get to do it, it will be a privilege to portray this iconic legend in our country's history. How the other jobs that I kind of signed on for, are they going to happen? It's now all kind of with the schedule all kind of going askew. I have no idea of how it's all going to pan out. A lot of it depends on, can we go back to production here in Los Angeles? I know that New Zealand productions are kicking up again in New Zealand, and a lot of Hollywood productions are moving to New Zealand because you can shoot down there. And I did hear last week that BC, British Columbia in Canada, is going back to work in 6 weeks, and that's where we shoot Siren. So at this point, my dear, your guess is as good as mine. And what's new in my game, eh? What's new?
I will tell you that we're recording this before Memorial Day, and Governor Newsom announced that on Memorial Day he would release the conditions for the entertainment industry to go back to work.
Which isn't that fantastic?
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's going to come with a lot of restrictions and new protocol, and that's not a bad thing. But I'd be really happy to fulfill and do the jobs that I was contracted to do. They're great jobs, they're great work. I'm very blessed. Also, too, though, I'd also like to say we are co-creators in this life and in our careers. And I position myself for these opportunities. You can't take them for guarantee. You can't count on it in anything as an actor. But when you position yourself, when you know you've refined your craft and you've worked on it, you've done what you can do, you're doing your social media, you're getting into the audition room, then something comes back to you. It does come back. And there were many times I wanted to give up over the course of 3 decades. And I remember my 40s was a very kind of lean time for acting work, because you are too old to be that hot babe on the block, so to speak. But you're also too young to be the wise old sage. And my mother would just always say to me, just remember, Judi Dench and Helen Mirren didn't get their great Hollywood breaks till they were in their 50s. 50s is a great time. It's a very empowering decade, being in your 50s, because you're finally comfortable in your own skin. You get the fact that it's all about just being you and being your best self, and it's a process of relaxation. And you get what you have to give, and it's a great time. And I think I've been told the 60s are even better. Not that I'm in a rush. But, hang in there, whatever industry you're in, hang in there. Perseverance and tenacity. None of this would have happened if I'd given up. None of it would have happened if I'd given up those multiple times I got frustrated or impatient. It's as Russell Crowe said to me the first time I met him when I came to Hollywood at the end of the 90s. He was very pedantic, and he just looked at me and he said, "Listen, mate," he said, "it's a marathon. It's not a sprint."
Right.
And that's true for life.
So I have one last question for you.
Yes, sir.
Where can people find you on the internet?
At Rena Owen, RenaOwen on Instagram, and look for the blue verified tick. I'm also at Rena Owen on Twitter. I am on Facebook as the Rena Owen or the Rena Owen, but I tend to hang out on Instagram because I post there and I can share from that platform to Facebook and Twitter. And I started out first doing Facebook, but I found I got very distracted and would spend hours on Facebook because there's so much interesting stuff to read and watch. So Instagram is my main platform, Rena Owen.
Well, thank you. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, bless.
I'm going to stop the recording just a second.
That's it for this time. If you enjoyed our podcast, please write a review on iTunes and tell your friends to subscribe. If you have any questions about influencers or suggestions for future episodes, email them to John at Pfeiffer@pfeifferlaw.com. Thank you for listening.